All right, let's get right into it. If you've ever looked at an automation script and wondered how it just knows where to click, how it fills out forms and zips around websites all by itself, then you've come to the right place. Today, we're cracking open the essential toolkit for any automation pro, WebElement Locators.
So let's start with the big question, right? You and I, we see a button that says log in, and we just click it. Easy. But our scripts, they don't have eyes. They're just looking at a giant wall of code. So how in the world does a script find that one specific button among all the chaos? That's the puzzle we're going to solve.
And the answer is something called a locator. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like GPS coordinates for the web. A locator is just a super precise address that you give your script. You're basically saying, hey, go to these exact coordinates in the HTML, and that's where you'll find the button you need to click. Without good locators, your script is totally lost.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the main challenge, and then we'll dive into our two main tools, CSS, the fast one, and XPath, the powerful one. After that, we'll get into some advanced techniques, like navigating by relationships, and finally, we'll see what to do when you need to find a whole group of elements at once.
Okay, so the two biggest players in this game are CSS Selectors and XPath. Now, they both get the same job done. They find elements, but they do it in really different ways. And knowing when to use which one, that's the secret to writing really solid, reliable automation.
Let's put them head-to-head real quick. CSS Selectors, they are generally faster, and the syntax is just cleaner, simpler. It's usually your first choice. Now, that little bit of speed might not sound like much, but when you're running a massive test suite with thousands of checks, it absolutely adds up. But then you have XPath. XPath is the powerhouse. It's way more flexible and can do some incredible things that CSS just can't, like traveling up the page structure, which we'll get into. So it's not about which one's better, it's about picking the right tool for the job.
All right, let's grab our first tool. I want you to think of CSS Selectors as your precision scalpel. For most jobs, when you have a clear, easy-to-identify target, CSS is the quickest, cleanest, most efficient way to get in there and do what you need to do.
So let's talk about the dream scenario. You open up the developer tools, you inspect an element, and what do you see? A beautiful, unique ID, or maybe a perfectly descriptive class name. This is what we love to see, and CSS makes finding it super simple.
And the syntax couldn't be easier. You want to find an ID? Just use a hashtag. A class? You use a dot. Simple as that. You can even chain them together. Say you want an input tag that also has a specific class. Or you can get even more specific and look for any attribute, like finding an input where the type attribute is email. It's just so clean and readable.
Okay, but let's get real for a second. We've all run into this headache. Dynamic IDs. You know, where some part of the ID is just randomly generated every single time the page loads, making a perfect match impossible. But usually there's a pattern, right? It might always start with user or always end with field. So how do we work with that?
Well, CSS has some amazing tricks up its sleeve for this exact problem. These three characters are your secret weapons. The asterisk means contains, so you can find an ID that has user anywhere inside it. The little caret means starts with, and the $sign means ends with. This is a total lifesaver. It means even when websites are being tricky with dynamic content, you can still write a perfectly stable locator.
You know, web pages are basically just boxes inside of more boxes, kind of like those Russian nesting dolls. So what if you need to find a specific list item, but only if it's inside that main navigation bar and not somewhere else on the page?
CSS gives you two great ways to navigate this. The greater than symbol, think of that as the strict parent. It only finds an LI that is an immediate child of a UL, which is an immediate child of a div. But a simple space, that's way more relaxed. It'll find any LI that lives somewhere inside that div, no matter how many levels deep it is.
Okay, so we've seen the speed and precision of the CSS scalpel. Now it's time to pick up our Swiss Army knife, XPath. For all those times when the page structure is a mess, when the attributes are unreliable, or when CSS just can't do what you need, XPath comes to the rescue with a whole bunch of powerful new tools.
And here is an absolute killer feature of XPath, something CSS just plain can't do. Sometimes, the most stable thing about an element isn't its ID or class. It's the actual text the user sees, like the word login on a button. CSS has no idea what that text says, but XPath does. And this is a huge deal for writing stable tests. because that user-facing text often changes a lot less than the code behind it.
And this is how you do it. You can literally write an XPath that says, find an element where the text is an exact match for login, or you can get even more flexible and say, find any element where the text contains the letters log. This is just incredible power, letting you find things based on what a real person actually sees on the screen.
Oh, and remember our old friend, the dynamic ID problem? Well, XPath can handle that too, no problem. The syntax looks a little different. You use these functions like contains or starts with, but the idea is exactly the same. So you can easily build that logic right into your XPath to handle those tricky, changing attributes.
Okay, now we're getting to the master level stuff. This is really where XPath just blows CSS out of the water. Using something called XPath Axes, you can navigate the web page like a family tree, not just down, but up, sideways, basically anywhere you need to go.
Think about this super common but really tricky situation you see on almost any form. You can easily find the little text label that says email, right? But that's not what you need to interact with. You need the actual input box right next to it. In the code, those two are siblings. How do you make that connection? CSS can't do it, but XPath can.
The logic here is actually pretty simple. It's just a three-step process. First, you find your starting point, your anchor, the label with the text email. Then you add the magic, the following-sibling access. That tells the script, okay, from here, look at the elements right next to me at the same level. And finally, you just tell it what you're looking for. In this case, an input tag. And just like that, you've built an incredibly robust locator based purely on relationships.
And following-sibling is just scratching the surface. You can also look backwards with preceding-sibling. You can jump one level up to the parent. You can even use ancestor to find, say, the main div that contains your element, no matter how far up it is. This is some serious power for navigating really complex websites.
So far, we've been totally focused on finding that one, single, perfect element. But what if your goal is different? What if you need to grab a whole group of things? Maybe you want to get all the links in a menu, or check every item in a list of search results. This is a really common task.
This is where a slightly different command comes in, findElements. And notice that S on the end, it's super important. Instead of finding one thing, this command finds everything that matches your locator and gives it back to you as a list. So if you searched for every single link on a page, you might get back a list with, 76 items in it all ready for you to work with. And once you have that list, the possibilities are endless. You can get a count of the items, maybe to make sure all your search results actually loaded. You can loop through and print out the text of every single one. You can even grab an item by its position in the list and say, hey, click the third link. Or you can filter the whole list to find the one that has the exact text you're looking for. So there you have it. You've got the precision scalpel of CSS and the powerful Swiss Army knife of XPath. This is the fundamental toolkit you need to find pretty much any element on any web page, no matter how tricky or dynamic it is. The only question left is, which website are you going to master first?